Welcome back to the video, and this video is not in Europe, but in Asia. So this would be, what if Vietnam decides to form an empire? So Vietnam does have the advantage with more coastal area, but at the same time, they also border with China. So they wouldn't be able to start off going north, but they would go and attack Laos and Cambodia. So they decide to declare war on both of them at the same time. And then at first, they would get any more of advantage trying to get more coastal area, and then trying to get like the South Vietnam border. But at the same time, they would also invade in the north in the Laos area. So if they would want to stop the Vietnams in the north, they would have to pull back their troops in the south to go and attack in the north for a slow invasion or a stalemate. And that's what they do. They exit their territory in South Vietnam, and they would start to go in the north, trying to push back the Vietnamese. But while the troops are in the north, the Vietnamese would cut Cambodia from the ocean, and then eventually they would go up, taking their capital, and then they would start to close in on Laos. And then eventually Laos surrenders. And then, yeah. So let's look at the peace treaty. So looking at this peace treaty, Vietnam has brought back the French Indochina. So they would also declare war on Thailand. So the Vietnamese has a disadvantage with a very big border with Thailand, so they decide to go in all sides, all in, and then eventually they cut this part off from Thailand, eventually capturing it, and then they start to go south. And then eventually their capital is being threatened on all sides, and then eventually it's taken, and then Thailand surrenders. So looking at this map, Myanmar decides to join, and then it was too late, and now they're taking over their panhandle, and then going from the south to north, and then eventually into a stalemate, and then Myanmar surrenders. So let's look at the peace treaty. In this peace treaty, we see Vietnam having all of the Southeast Asia. I mean, excluding Malaysia and Indonesia, the Philippines, and so on. And they have united this part of Southeast Asia into Vietnam rule. So with this, they declare war on Bangladesh. And then they decided to invade from here, and then they decided to do a naval invasion. Bangladesh, unexpecting this, they would have to retreat their troops back into here. But then it was too late, and then their armies wiped out, and then Bangladesh falls. So that was a very short war. But they decided to go and ask India for an ultimatum. That's what they do. So they ask India for any big amount of land, but they would, in return, they would ask for an alliance from Pakistan and China to protect their Kashmir region. So they would ask for like a lot of land. Also with this, I don't know what this part is called, but this part of land, including a little bit of the Indian territory on the mainland. And then eventually, India needs a lot more allies. So they would accept the ultimatum. And now let's look at the ultimatum with Bangladesh. So here's the peace treaty and the ultimatum that Vietnam proposed. And some compensation would go over to India. But now the Vietnamese would have an ally against Pakistan and China. So if the Pakistanis or the Chinese would try to invade the Kashmir region, the Vietnamese would be able to help out. But for that to happen more faster, they would need more countries, and that would be Nepal and Bhutan. These two are very mountainous, so it would have a while getting in. But eventually Bhutan falls, and then Nepal too. So that was a very short war. Let's look at the peace treaty once again. So here's the peace treaty in Nepal and Bhutan. So, as India predicted, Pakistan declares war. So, the Vietnamese would send their troops over to India trying to fight back the Pakistanis. And then, and since this was all of a sudden, the Pakistanis tried to invade a little bit of India, which it goes well for them. And then the Kashmir region would be the bloodiest war. But they do get their claims over Kashmir, and then they ask for peace. But then India refuses it. So, not only the Indians push back, but the Vietnamese too. So they would be able to push back the Pakistanis out of Kashmir, and also push back in their southern region, or the western region. And then they would start an invasion into Pakistan. And then there comes a stalemate. And then they would start a very small invasion, still having a lot of trouble with trying to keep up. But eventually another stalemate has been reached. So then another front happens, and a spearhead goes over, almost connecting with Afghanistan. But then eventually all fronts are connected. And then eventually Pakistan is split into two. The southern part falls, and Pakistan surrenders. So, let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty with Pakistan. India gets a little bit more of Kashmir, but for y'all know, this is what I found on the map. Whenever I downloaded this map, this is what it showed for this part of Kashmir belonging to India, and then this part that goes over to Pakistan. That's what it'll look like whenever I downloaded the map. So don't say that this is like the wrong map for the Pakistan, and this is the right map for India, or the wrong map for the Chinese, or anything like that. So this is what I found in the international map, with India having this part of Kashmir and Pakistan having this. And then right now, in this peace treaty, India settled their Kashmir claims with Pakistan. So, Pakistan doesn't have any more beef with India about the Kashmir region in this peace treaty. So, they decide to ask for China for peace over their Kashmir region. And then that goes bad, as they also declare war. And also, hopefully that y'all won't like put hate in the comments about the Kashmir region, Pakistan and India. But this will be into, Pakistan and China will get their videos about their empire, but their time will come, and once the beef settle down in Kashmir, then I will be doing their videos. So this is either country will get the Kashmir region in the empire videos, but don't say that this is the wrong map or this is the right map or anything down in the comments. Just to try to be calm in the comments, just not anything like that. Anyways, over here the Chinese gets any advantage to this war, since the Vietnamese are over here with the Indians. So they would have tried to storm into Hanoi, but then that's also into a stalemate. And then with the Himalayas blocking the Chinese, they would have a little bit of a hard time trying to cross the border, but they do make some pop-outs. And that's already into a stalemate. And then eventually they are able to get into the Chinese territory, and then the Indians would enter their new Kashmir region into the Chinese claims, and then eventually the Chinese would have to pull out their troops in Nepal and Bhutan to try to fight off the Indian and the Vietnamese. So the Vietnamese were able to push back the Chinese, and then eventually they get their island. And then soon, another front is happening and connects with this one, making the Chinese have to go back and fight off this new front. And then Taiwan decides to join. And then with Taiwan in the war, they would meet up with the Vietnamese on this island, trying to climb up here, and then go over to Hong Kong, and then a new front is established. And then eventually this front connects with this front, making one big front. And then eventually Taiwan makes another landing, and then eventually that connects. And then eventually Taiwan goes a little bit more north, trying to be careful about the North Koreans, since they are an ally of the Chinese, but they don't want to join the war, because then that would lead South Korea to join. And then if the North Koreans invade, Japan and the United States would join as a defensive pact for South Korea against the North Koreans. So they would try to stay away from the Korean peninsula as much as they can, but also trying to invade more of the Chinese territory. Soon, a spearhead goes very well, almost to connecting up with the Vietnamese on this one. And then eventually, the Chinese are kicked out of the coastal areas in the southern. And then eventually, this gets more bigger. And then eventually, the Vietnamese would realize the spearhead and then trying to form another one. Eventually, they connect, and that part falls. So with the Chinese troops almost gone, India would have an easy time trying to get more of the region, connecting up with Kyrgyzstan, and then soon they go over here, connecting into one big front line, and then eventually they get into Tibet, and then soon going into, I think this is like the Xinjiang region. So then they would go up, and since barely anybody is living over here, they're all in the coast of the water, the water coast in China, they would have an easy time advancing into the Xinjiang region and Tibet. And then eventually they would face a little bit more resistance since more of the Chinese troops are coming. And then eventually another spearhead appears, going towards Mongolia, and then soon making this spearhead more big. More of the Chinese troops realize that they're going to be encircled if they don't leave now. So that's what they do. They leave the spearhead. They leave the area where they're going to be encircled by the spearhead. And then most of them exit. But while that's happening, they decided to go over here to capture more of them, and then eventually encircling them. They would put up a good fight, but then eventually that part falls. Soon, Beijing is being threatened by another spearhead going towards them, and then eventually China surrenders. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty with China, and Tibet was released from China, and China was forced to recognize Taiwan as a country now, and had to cede some land over to Taiwan, as Hong Kong decided to join Taiwan in this, and they get this small island along with the major cities of China, only having this small area for the Chinese. Beijing over here still in their territory, but they were forced to release Tibet and relieve their claims in Kashmir. And here's the Vietnamese Empire. And hopefully y'all liked the video, and again, don't say in the comments that this was the right map or the wrong map or something around the Pakistan and Chinese Kashmir border dispute in the comments. And this is just for entertainment. I will be doing the Pakistan Empire and the Chinese Empire, but just don't to try to like start off some problems in the comment section. But hopefully y'all liked the video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.